An Instagram influencer slapped a 73-year-old widow in a memorial parking lot, not knowing 30 bikers were watching from inside. He was live streaming everything for his 3 million followers when he smacked Sonara Vega across the face. Sonara was a poor Gold Star widow whose Marine husband died in Fallujah. She just needed to park. She'd asked 3 young men filming a prank to move from the handicapped spot where she had a legal permit. That's when he slapped her. The bikers saw everything through the window. What these young men didn't know was about to destroy their lives. Sonara Vega had driven 40 miles that morning in her 20-year-old sedan, the one with the faded paint and the passenger window that wouldn't roll down anymore. She made this trip every month without fail, carrying fresh flowers to place at the memorial wall where her husband's name was engraved in marble. Gunnery Sergeant Rafael Vega, killed in action, April 2004. 21 years, and the pain never dulled. She lived on a small veteran's pension and cleaned houses 3 days a week to make ends meet. Her hands were calloused, her back ached constantly, but her heart remained devoted to honoring the man who'd given everything. The memorial parking lot was nearly empty that Tuesday morning. Just 3 young men standing around a rented Mercedes, expensive cameras pointed at each other, laughing too loud. Kirill Volkov, the ringleader, wore designer everything and a smile that never reached his eyes. His 2 friends, Aiden and Brock, orbited him like satellites, feeding off his energy and his followers. 3 million people watched Kirill's every move online. 3 million people who craved chaos, disguised as content. Sonara pulled into the lot slowly, her handicapped placard hanging from her rearview mirror. The only accessible spot was blocked by the Mercedes. She rolled down her window gently. "Excuse me, young men," she called softly. "Would you mind moving? I have a permit for that space." Her voice was kind, patient, the voice of someone who'd spent a lifetime being polite even when the world wasn't polite back. Kirill turned, phone already raised and recording. "Oh, look," he announced to his camera. "Grandma wants our spot." His friends snickered. Sonara stepped out of her car carefully, holding the flowers. White lilies, Raphael's favorite. She moved slowly, her hip replacement from last year still giving her trouble. "Please." "I just need a few minutes. I'm here to visit my husband's memorial." Kirill zoomed in on her weathered face. "Your husband?" he mocked. "What, he couldn't afford to take you somewhere better than this?" Aiden and Brock howled with laughter. Sonara's hands trembled, but she held the flowers tighter. "He died serving this country," she said quietly. "He died so people like you could stand here and say whatever you want." That's when Kirill's expression changed, not to shame, but to opportunity. He saw viral gold. "This is gonna be legendary," he whispered to his camera. Then he stepped forward and slapped Sonara Vega across the face. The sound echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Sonara stumbled backward, her thin frame no match for the force. The flowers fell from her hands, white petals scattering across the asphalt like snow. Her glasses flew off, clattering against the pavement. She hit the ground hard, her hips screaming in pain. The world blurred. All she could hear was laughter and the relentless hum of phones recording every second of her humiliation. "Should have minded your business, old lady," Kirill announced to his live stream, which had already climbed past 50,000 viewers. He turned the camera on himself, grinning. "Y'all just witnessed content gold. This is what happens when boomers try to boss Gen Z around." His comment section exploded, fire emojis, laughing faces, a few horrified reactions buried under waves of toxic encouragement. Sonara tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Her hands were scraped and bleeding. One of her hearing aids had fallen out. She reached for her glasses, but Brock kicked them away, laughing. "Whoops," he said, without a trace of remorse. Aiden circled her with his own phone, getting multiple angles, making sure nothing was missed. "This is going to break the internet," he said excitedly. What these young men didn't realize was that the diner across the parking lot wasn't empty. Inside that building, 30 members of the Blazing Serpents Motorcycle Club were gathered around pushed-together tables, finishing their monthly breakfast meeting. They met here every 4th Tuesday, the same diner for 15 years. Most of them were veterans. All of them had seen enough injustice in their lives to recognize it instantly. Davor Kurzic, the club president, sat facing the window. He was a big man, 58 years old, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. Former Army Ranger, 3 tours in Iraq, a chest full of medals he never wore, and nightmares he never talked about. He'd been mid-sentence discussing the club's charity ride schedule when movement outside caught his attention. He watched Sonara approach the young men, watched her polite request, watched her try to explain. Then he watched Kirill slap her. The table went silent. 30 men, ranging from their 40s to their 70s, all turned toward that window at once. Forks stopped mid-air. Coffee cups froze at lips. The room, which moments ago had been filled with laughter and the clatter of plates, became a tomb. If you believe people who hurt the defenseless deserve consequences, subscribe to this channel and show your support for those who stand up for the vulnerable. Davor didn't say a word. He simply stood up. That was all it took. 30 chairs scraped back in unison. 30 men rose to their feet like a single organism, perfectly synchronized. No one rushed, no one shouted. They moved with the calm, terrifying purpose of people who'd been trained to respond to violence with precision. Boots hit the floor in rhythm, a sound like war drums. Kirill was still filming himself, back turned to the diner, completely unaware. His viewer count had passed 75,000. The comments were chaos. Outside, Sonara remained on the ground, trying desperately to gather her scattered flowers. Her fingers shook as she reached for the white lilies, now crushed and dirty. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks, not from physical pain, but from the sheer cruelty of it all. She'd survived 21 years of widowhood, raised 2 children alone on pennies, and worked herself to exhaustion, and never once asked for anything but respect. Now she lay humiliated while strangers laughed and recorded her suffering for entertainment. Kirill panned his camera across the parking lot. "All right, fam, what should we do next?" He read comments aloud. Someone says, "Throw her flowers in the trash." Someone says, "Make her apologize for interrupting our shoot." He laughed. "Y'all are savage. I love it." Brock grabbed the remaining flowers from the ground and dangled them over a nearby garbage can. On 3, Aiden counted down dramatically. 1, 2. The diner door opened. The sound cut through everything. It wasn't loud, just a simple creak of hinges, but it carried weight. Kirill glanced over his shoulder, irritated at the interruption. His expression shifted instantly. The phone in his hand wavered. His smile dissolved like sugar and acid. 30 bikers stood in a perfect line outside the diner entrance, arms crossed, faces carved from stone. The sun sat behind them, casting long shadows across the parking lot that reached all the way to where Sonara lay. Davor walked forward first, his boots striking pavement with deliberate force. The others followed in formation, spreading out slowly until Kirill, Aiden, and Brock were surrounded. No escape routes, no gaps in the circle. Just 30 men who'd seen enough combat to know exactly how to control a situation without firing a single shot. The air itself seemed to thicken. Even the birds went quiet. Kirill tried to recover his bravado. "Yo, chill guys," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. "It's just content. Just a prank. Nobody got hurt." He gestured at Sonara, still on the ground. "She's fine. Tell them you're fine, Grandma." Sonara didn't respond. She couldn't. Her voice had abandoned her. All she could do was clutch her husband's flowers and try not to shake so visibly. Davor stopped 5 feet from Kirill. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "You just assaulted a Gold Star widow," he said quietly. His accent carried traces of his Croatian childhood, but his English was perfect and cold as January. Do you know what that means? Kirill's phone was still recording. His live stream had exploded to over 100,000 viewers. The comments were changing now. Less laughter, more alarm, more people demanding he run. "A Gold Star widow," Davor repeated, "means her husband died in service. Died so you could stand here with your expensive camera and your rented car and your millions of followers who taught you that cruelty is content." He took another step. "She came here to honor him. And you put your hands on her?" Kirill's friends had gone silent. Brock dropped the flowers. Aiden slowly lowered his phone. Both were edging backward, trying to blend into invisibility. "It's not that serious, man," Kirill stammered. "Like, I barely touched her. She's being dramatic for sympathy. Look, I'll apologize, okay?" He turned his camera towards Sonara, his influencer mask slipping back on. Hey, sorry if that was too rough. No hard feelings, yeah? He winked at his audience. See? All good. Crisis averted. But his hands betrayed him. They trembled. The phone shook in his grip. Davor didn't blink. Turn off the camera. Delete the footage. Now. Kirill's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being told what to do. His entire empire was built on defiance, on doing whatever got reactions. No way, he said. This is my content, my property. You can't make me delete anything. That's when the other bikers stepped closer, tightening the circle. Still silent, still calm, but the threat was unmistakable. Behind the wall of leather and denim, Sonara finally managed to pull herself into a sitting position. Her hips screamed in protest, but she refused to stay down any longer. One of the bikers, a woman named Vesna with silver hair and kind eyes, broke formation and knelt beside her. Easy now, Vesna whispered. We've got you. She helped Sonara to her feet gently, supporting her weight. Another biker handed Sonara her glasses, carefully cleaned. A third gathered every single flower, even the crushed ones, and placed them back in her arms like they were made of glass. Kirill watched this happening and felt something unfamiliar. Not quite fear yet, but its cousin. Uncertainty. His live stream chat was spiraling. Half his followers were cheering for the bikers. The other half were screaming at him to apologize for real. His notifications exploded as sponsors started sending messages. Major brands asking for explanations. Publicists demanding calls. His manager typing in all caps. He looked down at his phone, then back at Davor. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, he tried. Let's just everyone calm down and... Calm? Davor interrupted, his voice dropping even lower. You want calm? He gestured to Sonara, now standing but barely. That woman is 73 years old. She works 3 jobs to survive. She drove 40 miles on roads her car barely handles to put flowers on her dead husband's memorial, and you slapped her for views. He stepped so close Kirill could smell coffee on his breath. Where I come from, we have a word for men like you. But in English, I'll just say coward. Kirill's face flushed red. He tried to push past Davor. Get out of my way, old man. I'm leaving. Davor didn't budge. He stood like a mountain, immovable. You're not going anywhere until you make this right. Kirill's bravado cracked completely. He looked around desperately. 30 faces stared back, none of them friendly. His friends had already started walking toward their car, abandoning him. Brock called over his shoulder, Dude, you're on your own. We're out. Kirill spun toward them. Are you serious? You're just gonna leave me? Aiden shrugged. Man, we didn't sign up for this. This is your mess. They got in the Mercedes and drove off, filming through the windows as they left. Kirill stood alone now, surrounded, his empire crumbling in real time. His phone buzzed constantly, notifications pouring in, but they weren't congratulations anymore. They were condemnations. Screenshots of the slap were spreading across every platform: Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok. His face was everywhere, and the captions were brutal. Someone in the crowd behind the bikers shouted, You're done, Volkov! Another voice, Cancel him! A third, Arrest this scum! Kirill realized with dawning horror that people had gathered. Restaurant workers, shop owners, random passers-by, all holding their phones up, all recording. He wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. The narrative was controlling him. If you can't stand influencers who abuse people for clout, comment Justice Matters, and let's show the world what real accountability looks like. Davor pulled out his own phone and made a call. His voice was calm, professional. Yes, Sheriff's Department? I'm at the Veterans Memorial parking lot. We have an assault situation. Elderly victim, multiple witnesses, suspect is still on scene. Kirill's eyes went wide. Wait, what? You're calling the cops? Davor nodded. What did you think was going to happen? You commit a crime on camera and just walk away? This isn't the internet anymore. This is the real world. And out here, actions have consequences. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Kirill's face went from red to pale in an instant. His fingers flew across his phone screen, deleting frantically. Wait, he muttered. Let me just erase this. If there's no video, there's no evidence, right? But Davor shook his head slowly. Too late for that, son. Half the internet already has it. And we've got plenty of witnesses. He gestured to the crowd that had grown to nearly 50 people, all with phones pointed at Kirill like accusations. One biker, a tech-savvy younger member named Luca, stepped forward. He held up his tablet. Already downloaded your live stream before you could delete it. Sent copies to 5 different cloud services. Also forwarded it to every major news outlet in the state. He smiled without warmth. You wanted to go viral. Congratulations. Kirill's hands dropped to his sides, the phone nearly slipping from his grip. His entire body sagged. This can't be happening, he whispered. This was supposed to be funny. Supposed to get me trending. Funny? Vesna spoke up, her arm still supporting Sonara. You think humiliating a widow is funny? She guided Sonara closer. Tell him who your husband was. Tell him what Raphael did. Sonara's voice was barely audible at first, broken by emotion. Raphael was a Marine, gunnery sergeant. He died protecting his squad during an ambush in Fallujah. She looked Kirill directly in the eyes. He was 26 years old. We'd been married for 4 years. I was pregnant with our second child when they told me he wasn't coming home. The crowd went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Sonara continued, her voice growing stronger despite the tears. He threw himself on a grenade to save 11 men. 11 fathers, sons, brothers who got to go home because my Raphael didn't. She held up the flowers. Crushed and dirty, but still gripped tight. I bring these every month for 21 years. I talk to him. I tell him about our children, our grandchildren. I tell him the world he died for is still worth saving. Her voice cracked. Today, I was going to tell him I was wrong. Kirill couldn't look at her anymore. His head dropped. I didn't know, he mumbled. You didn't care, Davor corrected. You saw an elderly woman and thought she was an easy target, thought she couldn't fight back, thought her pain was content. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. 4 officers stepped out, and Davor approached them calmly, explaining the situation. Kirill watched, frozen, as one officer reviewed the video footage on Luca's tablet. The officer's expression hardened with each passing second. The officer approached Kirill. Kirill Volkov? Kirill nodded weakly. You're under arrest for assault and battery of an elderly person, elder abuse, and disturbing the peace. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Kirill's voice rose in panic. Elder abuse? That's a felony. The officer's face remained impassive. Yes, it is. Should have thought about that before you put your hands on her. The handcuffs clicked into place, and Kirill's legs nearly gave out. His phone slipped from his pocket and clattered on the pavement. The live stream was still running, still broadcasting his arrest to 150,000 viewers. As officers guided Kirill toward the cruiser, Sonara stepped forward. Wait, she called out softly. Everyone turned. She walked slowly to where Kirill stood, shame and fear written across his young face. She looked up at him. This small woman who'd survived decades of grief and struggle. Young man, do you know why I asked you to move? Kirill shook his head, unable to speak. Because that spot you were blocking? That's where Raphael proposed to me. Right there, 30 years ago, before he enlisted, before everything changed. She touched the spot on her cheek where he'd hit her. You didn't just slap an old woman today. You slapped every widow who's ever had to bury a hero. Every mother who's folded a flag instead of holding her son. Every child who's grown up without a father because someone like Raphael chose duty over safety. Kirill's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks freely now. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just wanted... Wanted what? Sonara asked. Fame? Money? Attention? She shook her head sadly. You have 3 million people watching you, and you use that gift to hurt instead of help. My Raphael had 11 men watching his back, and he used his last moments to save them. That's the difference between a man and a boy. The officers led Kirill to the car. He looked back once, meeting Sonara's eyes, and saw something there he'd never forget. Not hatred, disappointment. Somehow, that was worse. The police car drove away, sirens fading into the distance. The crowd slowly dispersed, but not before dozens approached Sonara with words of support, offers of help, even money she politely refused. The bikers remained, forming a protective circle around her as she finally made her way to the memorial wall. Davor walked beside her, offering his arm for support. Vesna carried the flowers. The others followed in respectful silence, their boots creating a solemn rhythm on the stone pathway. Sonara stopped in front of the marble wall, where names were etched in neat rows. She traced her fingers over the letters. Rafael Antonio Vega. Her lips moved in silent conversation, words meant only for him. After a long moment, she placed the flowers at the base of the wall, arranging them carefully despite their crushed petals. "Beautiful things can survive damage," she whispered. "They just need someone to handle them gently afterward." She kissed her fingers and pressed them to Raphael's name. Davor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you need anything at all, you call us." He handed her a card with the Blazing Serpent's contact information. "We look after our own, and anyone connected to a fallen brother is family." Sonara took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said. "All of you. You didn't have to do that." Vesna squeezed her shoulder. "Yes, we did. That's what honor looks like. Protecting those who can't protect themselves. Something that young man never learned." Meanwhile, across town in a holding cell, Kirill sat on a metal bench with his head in his hands. His phone had been confiscated, but he didn't need it to know what was happening online. He could feel it. The weight of 3 million followers turning into 3 million judges. His cellmate, an older man with weathered hands and tired eyes, watched him silently. "First time?" the man asked. Kirill nodded. "What did you do?" The man's tone was conversational, almost kind. "I hit an old lady," Kirill admitted, his voice hollow. "For a video, for views." The man whistled low. "That's cold. Why would you do that?" Kirill looked up, eyes red from crying. "I don't know. Because I could? Because people would watch? Because I stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as content?" He laughed bitterly. "My whole life is online. Everything's about numbers, views, likes, shares, followers. I forgot there's a real world with real consequences." The man nodded slowly. "I got a grandmother, 81 years old, raised me when my parents couldn't. If someone touched her like that," he let the sentence hang. Kirill understood perfectly. "You know what the worst part is?" Kirill continued. "She forgave me, or at least she didn't curse me out. She just looked disappointed, like I was a kid who should have known better." The man leaned back against the wall. "That's worse than anger. Anger fades. Disappointment sticks. It means she expected something from you that you didn't deliver. It means she saw potential you wasted." Kirill put his head back in his hands. "I wasted everything. My career's done. My sponsors are gone. My friends abandoned me. And for what?" A 15-second clip that made people hate me. Outside the jail, the media circus had begun. News vans lined the street. Reporters delivered breathless updates. Influencer arrested for assaulting war widow became the lead story on every channel. The video played on loop, dissected frame by frame. Legal experts weighed in on potential sentencing. Psychologists discussed the dangers of clout-chasing culture. Social media erupted in debates. Some defended Kirill, claiming it was just a prank gone wrong, but the vast majority demanded justice, demanded accountability, demanded change. If you believe online influencers need to be held responsible for their actions, subscribe and share this story. Let's make accountability go viral. Back at the memorial, Sonara finished her visit. The bikers escorted her to her car, checking to make sure she was steady enough to drive. "I'll be fine," she assured them. "I've survived worse than this, but thank you. Truly." As she drove away, Davor gathered his crew. "Brothers, sisters," he said. "Today we did what we're supposed to do. We stood up. We protected. We represented what that wall means." He pointed to the memorial. "Every name on there is someone who gave everything. The least we can do is make sure their families are safe." 3 days passed. Kirill made bail, posted by his parents who flew in from another state, horrified and heartbroken by what their son had become. He stepped out of jail to a wall of cameras and shouted questions. "Kirill, do you regret what you did? Will you apologize publicly? What do you say to your former fans?" He kept his head down, saying nothing, and climbed into his parents' car. His social media accounts had been decimated. Instagram banned him permanently for violating community guidelines. YouTube demonetized his channel. TikTok removed every video. 3 million followers vanished overnight. His apartment, once filled with expensive equipment and designer clothes, felt like a mausoleum. Sponsorship deals were canceled with tersely worded emails. His management company dropped him. The Mercedes was repossessed, bills piled up on his counter, and for the first time in 5 years, Kirill had no income. He sat on his couch in the dark, scrolling through news articles about himself. Influencer scum, internet trash, career destroyed. The comments were savage and unrelenting. Some part of him knew he deserved it. Most of him just felt hollow. But something else was happening too. The video of Sonara's quiet dignity, her words about Raphael, her grace under cruelty, went viral for different reasons. People shared it not to mock but to honor. Donations poured into veteran widow support funds. Over $300,000 in 72 hours. Organizations received volunteer applications by the hundreds. The Blazing Serpent's phone rang constantly with people wanting to help, to contribute, to be part of something meaningful. Sonara's story became a movement, not because of what Kirill did, but because of who she was. A local news station reached out to Sonara for an interview. She agreed reluctantly, not for attention, but because they promised to highlight veteran family struggles. She sat in her small living room, surrounded by photos of Raphael, and told her story with quiet strength. The interviewer asked, "Do you hate Kirill Volkov?" Sonara considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "I pity him. He's young and lost. He built his life on sand, and now he's surprised the tide came in. But hate? Hate would dishonor Raphael's memory. He died so people could be better. I have to believe people can be better." The interview aired and was watched by millions. Sonara became an unexpected symbol of grace and resilience. Schools invited her to speak. Veterans organizations asked her to share Raphael's story. She accepted some invitations, declined others, always humble, always redirecting attention to the fallen rather than herself. The Blazing Serpents made her an honorary member, presenting her with a custom vest embroidered with Gold Star Widow and protected by the serpents. She cried when they draped it over her shoulders. "Raphael would have loved you all," she told them. Kirill watched the interview from his darkened apartment. Seeing Sonara's face again, hearing her voice, broke something inside him that had been cracking for days. He grabbed a notebook and started writing, not for social media, not for content, just for himself. An attempt to understand how he'd gotten so lost. Page after page of confessions, regrets, realizations. He wrote about the algorithm, how it rewarded extremes, how each video had to be more outrageous than the last. How he'd stopped asking if he should, and only asked if it would get views. How somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten he was dealing with human beings. His court date arrived. Kirill stood before a judge, his parents in the gallery, reporters scribbling notes. The prosecutor laid out the charges methodically. Assault and battery on an elderly person. Elder abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage from multiple angles. Witness testimony from 30 bikers. Medical reports of Sonara's injuries. The prosecutor recommended the maximum sentence. Defense attorney argued for leniency, citing Kirill's age, his remorse, his previously clean record. The judge listened to both sides, expression unreadable. Then she asked, "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" Kirill stood. His voice shook. "Your Honor, there's nothing I can say that makes this okay. I hurt someone who'd already survived unimaginable pain. I exploited her for entertainment. I was cruel because I thought cruelty was content." He looked toward where Sonara sat in the back of the courtroom. She'd come, despite everything. "Mrs. Vega, I know sorry isn't enough. But I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for who I was. And I'm sorry I wasted your time having to be here instead of at your husband's memorial, where you should be." His voice broke, but he continued. "I deserve whatever punishment you decide. I just hope someday I can be someone your husband wouldn't be ashamed of." The judge deliberated. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Volkov, what you did was reprehensible. You targeted a vulnerable person for profit. You showed no regard for her dignity, her loss, or her humanity. However," she continued, "I've also reviewed the victim's statement. Mrs. Vega has requested leniency. She believes you're capable of change. I'm not sure I share her optimism, but I respect her judgment. The judge sentenced Kirill to 90 days in county jail, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service at veterans organizations, and mandatory counseling. He was also ordered to pay restitution and court fees. Kirill served his time. 90 days felt like 90 years. He shared a cell with a veteran who told him stories about war, sacrifice, and brotherhood. Stories that made Kirill understand what he'd really done that day in the parking lot. When he was released, he didn't try to rebuild his influencer career. He got a job at a warehouse. Loading trucks for minimum wage, he showed up on time, worked hard, kept his head down. Nobody recognized him anymore, and he preferred it that way. Anonymity felt like a gift after years of chasing fame. His community service took him to veterans centers, homeless shelters, and support groups. He met men and women who'd given pieces of themselves for strangers. He heard stories of loss and survival. He learned names, listened to histories, and slowly began to understand what service actually meant. One afternoon, 6 months into his sentence, he was cleaning tables at a veterans hall when someone touched his shoulder. He turned. It was Sonara. She smiled gently. "Hello, Kirill." His eyes filled immediately. "Mrs. Vega." "I didn't know you came here. I volunteer on Thursdays," she said. "Help serve lunch." She gestured to a seat. "Walk with me?" They walked through the hall slowly, her pace dictating the rhythm. He stayed silent, letting her lead the conversation. "I've been watching your progress," she said. "The coordinators tell me you're doing well, working hard, being respectful." He nodded. "It's the least I can do." She stopped and faced him. "I forgave you that day in the parking lot, Kirill. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Trust is earned through consistent action over time. Do you understand?" He nodded again. "Yes, ma'am, I do." "Good," she said. "Then keep going. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Not for redemption or publicity, but because it's right. That's what Raphael would tell you." They continued walking. Kirill found his voice. "Why did you ask the judge to go easy on me?" Sonara smiled sadly. "Because Raphael died believing people could change. Believing the world could be better. If I gave up on you, I'd be giving up on everything he died for. You're young. You made terrible choices. But you're not beyond saving. And if I can help save you, then maybe Raphael's death means something more." Months turned into years. Kirill completed his probation. He enrolled in community college, studying social work. He started a blog, not for fame, but for accountability, documenting his journey from influencer to someone trying to make amends. He wrote about the dangers of clout culture, the importance of empathy, and the real people behind the screens. It reached a small audience, but it was genuine. No algorithms, no tricks, just honesty. And slowly, painfully, he rebuilt himself into someone he didn't hate seeing in the mirror. The Blazing Serpents continued their work. They started an annual Rafael Vega Memorial Ride, raising funds for Gold Star families. Hundreds of bikers participated each year, riding from the memorial to the state capitol, flags flying, engines roaring in tribute. Sonara rode in a custom sidecar built specifically for her, waving to crowds who lined the streets. She became the heart of a movement she never asked to lead, but embraced because Raphael would have wanted her to. Kirill asked to participate in the 3rd annual ride. He didn't expect them to say yes, but Davor called him personally. "You can ride support vehicle," Davor said. "Carry supplies, help with setup. You're not family yet, but you're trying. That counts for something." Kirill showed up at dawn, worked tirelessly all day, and didn't ask for recognition. At the end of the ride, Sonara sought him out. She handed him a small photo. Raphael in his dress blues, smiling, young and full of hope. She pressed it into Kirill's hand. "Remember this face," she said. "Remember what real courage looks like." He does now, and he tries every day to honor it. 5 years after the slap that changed everything, Kirill stood at the memorial wall. He carried white lilies, Sonara's tradition, now his own. He placed them at Raphael's name and spoke quietly. "I'm sorry I never got to meet you, sir. I'm sorry my first connection to your memory was through hurting your wife. But I want you to know I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to be someone worthy of the world you died protecting." He stepped back and saluted, a gesture he'd learned meant something. Behind him, Sonara watched with tears in her eyes. "Raphael," she whispered to the wall, "would be proud." The story spread not as a viral moment, but as a lesson about consequences, about grace, about the difference between chasing attention and earning respect, about how the worst moments can become catalysts for change if we let them. Kirill never became famous again, and he was grateful. He became something better. He became useful. He became kind. He became someone who understood that 3 million followers meant nothing compared to one person's forgiveness earned through years of consistent change. And Sonara? She continued her monthly visits, her volunteer work, her quiet advocacy. The world had tried to break her that day in the parking lot. Instead, she had broken the cycle of cruelty, replacing it with something radical: compassion for those who least deserved it, strength wrapped in gentleness. A living example of what it means to honor the fallen by being better to the living. If you believe in second chances earned through real change, and if you believe in protecting those who've sacrificed everything, subscribe to this channel, share this story. And remember that bikers, veterans, and ordinary people with extraordinary hearts are still out there, standing up for what's right. Thank you for watching. Honor the fallen, protect the vulnerable, and never forget that one moment of cruelty can be transformed by a lifetime of making amends.